All right, so now we're going to be doing our top 10 NBA players. And if you didn't see the 25 through 11 list, go ahead and watch that. And I kind of explained how I'm doing the criteria of this list, so definitely check that out. But now we're going to get into the top 10. I'm sure this won't offend anybody. I'm sure you're all going to agree perfectly with what I have to say here, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 10, we have Damian Lillard. And like I said before, we're not factoring injuries. We're just looking at talent. And Damian Lillard is the closest thing we've seen to Steph Curry. If you just put a nice roster, a well-constructed team around Damian Lillard, I feel like he'd be a much more successful player. I've hated how they've built around Dame in Portland his entire career. Whenever he was with CJ, that backcourt never made sense to me because they were basically, CJ was just a poor man's version of Dame. So it was very redundant. I hated that duo. Not that they weren't fun to watch, but I knew that they weren't going to win anything. And the one time they actually put, perimeter defensive wings around him, Al-Farouq Aminu, guys like that, they made it to the conference final. Now, I know they got smashed by the Warriors, but that was the furthest that Dame's ever made it in the playoffs. And they've tried to tinker with that, but it seems like the past year or two they've been trying to do like this two timeline sort of thing with, they have a nice young core along with Dame and a couple vets. That's terrible. I'm glad Dame has finally requested a trade. I think you get him on a competently run team, he's going to be an absolute monster. You're going to see him making late playoff runs. He's arguably the most clutch player in the league. Whenever they made that clutch player award, I thought Dame was a shoo-in to win it, but obviously he didn't this year because of injury. But I'm still very high on Dame. I think he's a top 3 shooter in the NBA. You can argue between Steph, Clay, and him. What order? Obviously, Steph's 1, but Dame's definitely in the top 3 for that. He's just incredible, and I can't wait to see him on a new team. Coming in at number 9, we have Jayson Tatum. And you can make an argument that Jayson Tatum is the most complete player in the NBA in terms of his offensive ability, his defensive ability. He's definitely cut from that Kawhi/PG mold. But ultimately, the reason why I don't have him a little higher, some other people might have him, is there are definitely times in games where it seems like Jayson Tatum just kind of takes breaks, like he's not as engaged. We saw him play pretty bad in the finals. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but he also wasn't good. I think he was like 20 a game on really bad efficiency. Wiggins kind of clamped him down. But there are times where he just goes off. And as someone who was rooting heavily for the Sixers in that series this year, he kind of just ripped my heart out and threw it in a blender in Game 6 because it looked like Philly was a shoo-in to win that game, and he went off. Like, he was playing terrible that game, and then the last, 6 minutes was it? He just went insane. I kind of wanted to cry after that. And, like I said, when he's engaged, he's one of the most complete players in the league, but he definitely has moments where he just takes plays off. He's kind of standing in the corner, doesn't really look like he's as in the flow of the offense, so I don't like that. But again, he's only 25. That's going to improve with age. He's been under a microscope ever since he's been a rookie just because Boston is arguably the biggest brand in the sport. But look at how much success they've had in Boston. 4 conference finals appearance, a finals appearance. You can't tell me that they're not going to win a championship eventually. I mean, they're too good. Tatum is only going to get better with age, so I think it's fair to put him here at 9. Coming in at number 8, we have Jimmy Butler. And yeah, I will admit that Jayson Tatum is probably a more talented player overall than Jimmy Butler is. But Jimmy Butler has that dog mentality. It's been described as the Mamba mentality, just that it factor, to just turn it up a notch and be a complete different level of player whenever it matters the most. And we've seen Tatum struggle with that. Jimmy is a guy who completely elevates his game. He's never going to be a guy who's going to get like a bunch of regular season awards. I think he's a guy who understands that you really should conserve your energy for the playoffs, and there's a reason why he's always phenomenal. There's a reason why the Heat always seem to perform better, at least in my opinion. Like, they always seem to perform better in the playoffs than what I expect them to do, because they kind of just look like a mediocre team in the regular season. That Jimmy Butler turns it up a notch. And if you're simply just ranking this based off of playoffs alone, Jimmy Butler's probably a top 5 player in the world, because just his ability to elevate his game in the playoffs alone. I mean, getting the Heat to the finals in 2020 as the 5 seed, no one had that, especially beating the Milwaukee Bucks, who had the reigning back-to-back MVP Giannis, beating them in 5 in the second round. And then this year, being the 8th seed and getting to the finals, no one had that happening. And I've been a big critic of the Heat. Not that I don't like them. It's just I'm not a fan of the construction of their roster at all. Like, they don't have a real starting level point or power forward. And, they kind of had a pretty bad offseason. We're all kind of expecting Dame to go there. But Jimmy is the reason why the Heat are, the powerhouse they've been. I know they haven't been able to close it out and get that championship, but you just look at the success that they've had in the Jimmy Butler era. He's been there, 4 or 5 years, and they've made it to 2 finals and a conference final in 2022. So it's like they've just had such sustained success and been one of the more well-run organizations. A lot of that goes to Jimmy Butler because he's just phenomenal. He's tenacious defender, really does anything on offense his team asks him to do. If he needs to play more of the playmaking role, he can do that. He's not known for a three-point shooter, but he's not afraid to take the big shot. So this is where Jimmy is here at 8. Coming in at number 7, we have LeBron James, and I feel like I'm going to get some backlash for putting LeBron at 7, but I'm not putting him here because I'm a hater of LeBron. I've had my problems with LeBron, but I try to remove my bias from these videos. And I don't think that it's an unreasonable thing to put LeBron at 7. I just think at this point in his career, he's 38 years old. The guys above him are in the peak of their prime right now. It's no knock on LeBron that he's 7. That being said, he clearly is starting to show some signs of father time. And LeBron's aging is very different from your normal NBA player's aging, because usually when a player starts to age out of their prime, they kind of just fall off a cliff. Look at Dwayne Wade. Just was terrible after he left the Heat. I mean, he was okay in Chicago, but by the year he was on the Cavs, he was like a train wreck. You look at Kobe after the injury, he fell off. There's plenty examples of when all-time greats age, they kind of just get bad really quick. LeBron, it's a very slowed process of him slowly just getting a little worse. I think it's to the point now where LeBron, whenever he was the best in the world, he was able to just carry his team to heights that the team had no place being. You look at 2007 carrying that terrible team to the finals. You look at 2018 carrying that terrible team to the finals. He's clearly not that anymore. He can't do that at this point in his career, at his age, where he can just completely take over the game on both sides of the ball. But he's still a phenomenal player. I mean, he just broke the all-time scoring record. That obviously speaks to his longevity, but he's still a great playmaker. His three-point shot has come a long way. He used to struggle, especially think back to the Miami days. He was basically a non-threat from 3, where now I think he's a very respectable three-point shooter around the league. Like I said, his playmaking is really good. And despite being 38, he still is really able to lean into his athleticism. He's still a very physical player. But he definitely, you can tell, there's times where he needs to conserve his energy, because especially it seems like he sacrifices a lot on defense, which you can do when you have Anthony Davis anchoring your defense. Like I said, he's just not able to impact the game as much now as he once could, but he's still great. I really feel like I shouldn't get hate for this. 7 is still phenomenal. The 7th best player in the world is still incredible. So in at number 6, we have Luka Doncic. So when you talk about the most skilled players in basketball, Luka Doncic is right at the top of that list. I mean, the amount of things he can do on the offensive side of the ball is essentially limitless in terms of his ball handle, his three-point shot, just his shot creation and finishing at the rack is obviously all incredible. But the thing that really sets Luka apart for me is it feels like he plays the game at his own pace. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if he's running fast to the rim or if he's going slow. It seems like he just has such a high IQ where he's able to manipulate the defense no matter what they give him. And it seems like he's always able to find the open man on the wing. I think you can make a case that he is the best playmaker in basketball right now. And like I said, like he doesn't really use athleticism at all. So that really makes it even more impressive and just shows how skillful he really is, because he has basically not an athletic bone in his body. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but you watch him, it looks like he really looks like he's an old man out there on the court. Like he kind of just slowly walks around, and like the way he gets by defenders is kind of more based on like his Euro step more than his speed. So he's definitely a really fun watch. One of the most skillful players in the league, and they're going to be a fun team next year with him and Kyrie fully, ingrained into the offense. So Luka's here, just barely misses the top 5, but let's get into the top 5 now. So coming in at number 5, we have Joel Embiid, and once we get to this point with these players, they're all so good. It kind of just comes down to your own preference, how you rank them. Joel Embiid obviously just won the MVP this year, but it is a unique situation. I've been one of Joel Embiid's biggest supporters for the past 3 seasons now. He's one of my 3 favorite players in the league. Harden, Embiid, and Curry are my favorite 3 players in the league. So I was pushing for Embiid to win MVP the past 2 seasons. He finally got it this year. So it was kind of a bittersweet moment for me because, yeah, he got MVP, but it's also the year where I actually had to acknowledge that he's no longer the best center in the NBA. So it was painful to do that because I've been arguing Embiid over Jokic for years now. But even though Embiid got his MVP finally, this was kind of the year where I had to finally acknowledge that. We'll get into that more with Jokic. But Embiid, we all know, he's one of the most dominant forces in the game, one of the most unguardable players, because he does have the pure dominance whenever he drives to the rim, but he also has a very skillful post game. Whereas like Anthony Davis, I think Joel Embiid is much more of a skilled offensive player than Anthony Davis is, because AD will like settle and just take like bad contested mid-range shots. Joel Embiid's fadeaway is very reminiscent of Kobe Bryant. I've even seen the combination. He's basically just Kobe in a center's body. And obviously it's a little exaggerated, but you can see in certain plays where someone might think that. He's very clutch, very good shooter for a big man, very good defender. There's just not very many holes in his game. He's a very complete, dominant player, and I think he's like the quintessential modern era big man. So he's here at 5. Coming in at number 4, we have Kevin Durant, and I think Kevin Durant is the greatest scorer of all time. Not that he averages the most points per game, not that he's going to finish with the most total points. What I mean when I say the greatest scorer ever, I mean is he can literally score from anywhere on the floor in any which way. Whether it's 30 feet away from the basket, whether it's 5 feet away from the basket, it doesn't matter. Kevin Durant is the most skilled offensive player we have ever seen. For a 7-footer to be able to handle the ball like a point guard, to be able to dunk like a center, and there's basically 0 flaws in his offensive game. He's an absolute offensive juggernaut machine. And he's grown as a defender. He was pushing elite defender when he was with the Warriors. Now, I think it's obviously a lot easier to be a great defender in the Warriors system, but he's definitely come a long way from his Thunder days where he was basically seen as like a 0 on defense, whereas now I think he's a pretty respectable defender, especially in the playoffs when he's fully engaged. He's had some injury concerns, but I still think he's one of the best players in the world. He's just been through some really weird situations. The fit with Russ in OKC was never great. And the Brooklyn thing, like I said, I think about like a month or 2 ago, I said in a video that we were going to make the NBA Chronicles where we just go through like failed teams and talk about what happened. The Brooklyn Nets certainly will be part 1 of that video series if I ever do get to it, just because such a colossal mess needs its own video. I won't really get into it now, but KD, we all know how good he is. I mean, just unstoppable. Coming in at number 3, we have Steph Curry, arguably the most impactful player of this generation. What can I say about Steph that hasn't already been said? We all know his impact on the court is basically uncalculatable. How obviously the 3-point shot is there, but also just like the spacing he creates for his teammates, because you literally cannot step an inch back off of guarding Steph Curry, and just creates so much more open space for his teammates. And I think like it's not reflected in his assist numbers how much better he makes his teammates, because the side of the court he's always on is kind of being shut down, so it leaves so much more open room for the other guys. And you've seen guys like Iguodala, guys like Andrew Wiggins, obviously KD benefited from it, just really do well in the system because they have just the gravity of Steph Curry takes so much off of his teammates. And so, yeah, I mean, I still think at this point he's a top 3 player. He just won a Finals MVP last season with a good team, but he didn't have like any other All-NBA players with him. So I thought that was a really impressive championship. And then this year, you cannot put that on Steph at all. The fact that they even won a playoff series this year, I think, is extremely impressive, just given the complete and absolute disaster of a mess the locker room chemistry was, the feud between Draymond and Jordan Poole. I'm glad that that's finished with. And Steph was incredible in that Sacramento Kings series in the first round. So I still think he deserves to be up here in the top 3. Coming in at number 2, we have the reigning Finals MVP, Nikola Jokic. So, yeah, like I said earlier, a little bittersweet for me because I'm finally willing to admit that Nikola Jokic is the best center in basketball. For the past 3 seasons, I was arguing it's Embiid. But after what I just saw Jokic do in the playoffs, there's no realistic way I can argue. Even though I still like Embiid more, there's no realistic way I can put Embiid over Jokic anymore. The thing that was always missing from Jokic's resume was like long-term playoff success. Like, yeah, they had a nice run in the bubble, but after that, there was really nothing that noteworthy. Then this year, I mean, he went on one of the greatest historic playoff runs ever and was essentially unguardable. And like I said earlier with Luka, when you talk about the most skilled basketball players, Jokic is probably number 1 on the list. He's probably the most skilled player in all of basketball because similar to Luka, he's not very athletic, but just his IQ, probably best in the league. His passing, you can argue, is best in the league. His scoring is incredible as well, and I feel like everyone talks about the passing, but the guy can also drop 50 like it's nothing. And it seems like he never gets tired either. Like, he plays a lot of minutes as well. So, I mean, he's insane. He's incredible. I don't want to say I regret knocking on him the past couple of years because I do think some of those arguments still held up for that time period, but for me, it's kind of like a relief off the back of my shoulder, off my back, because I no longer have to do the Jokic and Embiid debate. It's like, fine, it's settled. There's nothing I can really say now. Jokic is the best center in the league. And to some people, he's the best in the world right now. If you have Jokic at 1, I have no argument about that. I respect that. I'm just going to tell you now why I have one guy over him. And at number 1, the best player in the world, according to me, is still Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know that they had a very weird playoff performance this year. I mean, he got kind of banged up, but again, this list isn't necessarily just based off this year. This is just in a vacuum based on talent. Who do I want the most? And I still want Giannis. I think he is still the most effective player in basketball due to his two-way ability. He's won a Defensive Player of the Year, and I've seen with my own 2 eyes, Giannis had the greatest finals performance that I've ever seen. I know LeBron had a fantastic one in 2016, but I didn't see that. I started watching basketball the year after. 2017 was my first season watching basketball. So of all the finals that I've seen, Giannis in 2021 was the greatest finals performance that I've ever seen. And for me, that just kind of is always going to stick with me. Being down 2-0 in that series to the Phoenix Suns and then coming back all the way, and just how dominant he was. Like, he just physically dominated the Suns that series, dropped 50 and 6 blocks in the closeout game to get the Bucks' first championship in 50 years. And then the next year took the eventual Eastern Conference champion Celtics to 7 games without his second best player. That's like all-time great GOAT stuff right there. And that Celtics team was a all-time great defensive team as well, and he was still doing that, dropping 40 pieces left and right. So if you want to take Jokic, that's fair. I have no argument just based off what Jokic just did. But for me, the defensive value, I think, rises Giannis over Jokic for me. I've seen him just be able to out-physical people, like, to the point where it doesn't matter who you throw on him. He's still just going to dunk over everyone and block every shot. To me, that's just a little more valuable than what Jokic brings. That's just my preference. But that has been my top 25. I really appreciate it if you've made it this far. Please let me know down in the comments down below. I know this isn't a controversial type of video at all, but please feel free to comment. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.